but I will go ahead and get started. So welcome to the Green Burial Council's peer-to-peer forum. The topic this month or this quarter is educating our communities about green burial, with presenters Brian Hayden, Lee Webster, and Samuel Perry. So my name is Stephanie Drazen. I am on the board of directors for the Green Burial Council. I just wanted to welcome everybody. We will go ahead and get started. So Brian Hayden is going to be your moderator, and he is a course producer at ReDesigning the End. Brian has extensive experience as a podcast producer and a teacher, and co-founded HeatSpring in 2007. He's trained thousands of solar installers over the past 15 years before venturing into the end of life field. So he's got the green and the end of life combined. And then ReDesigning the End is an educational platform committed to education to improve the experience of aging and dying. So we, the Green Burial Council, have partnered with Brian and ReDesigning the End on some of our courses that we offer to train death care professionals. So I am going to go ahead and turn things over to Brian, and he can go ahead and get us started.
Great. I'm going to share my screen.
Oh, one thing I'm going to say, I believe our tech support can do this as well, but if you are not speaking, please mute your microphone so that everybody can hear the presenters. Thank you.
All right, everybody, what's going on? My name is Brian Hayden with ReDesigning the End, and I want to start with gratitude for the GBC. Green Burial Council, when I started to kind of like look into green burial, I was just like, couldn't believe what an amazing resource the Green Burial Council is. And I appreciate that the GBC sets standards, that they provide education, they convene us in events like this. And so thank you, GBC, for hosting this event, for everything that the GBC does. So for the people who are here attending, I'm guessing that you're here because you think green burial is cool. And so we're going to like skip over all that part of it. And we're just going to assume that we're here to think about like, how do we do more, do better, offer better solutions? And so with that, I'm just going to have a few slides, and then we're going to turn it over to the actual presenters, Lee and Samuel. So this map right here is taken from the GBC website. So this is an interactive map that the GBC provides, and it shows on the top is the GBC certified cemeteries and products. And then the bottom one is GBC certified funeral homes across North America. And when you're zoomed out like this and looking at this map, it's really exciting. You can see the results of like many years of hard work of getting us to this point where there are so many options for people who are interested in green burial, green funerals. So that's something that we should all celebrate. The movement is underway. But when I zoom in on where I live, and I suspect this is true for most people wherever they live, it's harder to find options. And so while the future is already here that we are hoping for, it's just not evenly distributed yet. And so I like to think about what would it take for us to have 100 times or 1,000 times the current options that we have today, so that wherever you live, you could have maybe even multiple choices for green burial or green funerals. So that's kind of an exciting challenge. And I think that that's what we're building toward. So thanks for joining me in that kind of project. What do I think is the number one way to get there? I think education is probably the biggest leverage point that we have. And it's a pretty straightforward thing that we have to do. We have to take what's inside the brains of the smartest and most experienced people in the industry and take what's in their brains and put it into everybody else's brain. And so that's part of what we're here to do tonight. And I think if we can take what's in the smartest people's brains and put it into everybody else's brain, then we can all start to bring our unique perspectives and skills and motivations, and we can all bring that to the industry and make it a richer, more interesting place to be and provide better solutions for people who are interested in green burial. So how are we going to do it? Tonight, we're going to talk about two particular groups of people that are like primed for this education, and I think are ready to like absorb it. The first are green cemetery operators, or people who are interested in starting a green burial cemetery or working at one. This picture is Emily Miller's place in Colorado. She had an idea for this place and has worked really, really hard over a number of years to make it a reality. So the question is, what technical expertise does someone like that need to actually get over the hump and do it? And then the second group I want to talk about tonight are green funeral providers. And this picture is a group of us from the National Funeral Directors Association conference in Las Vegas last month. And we had a whole bunch of conversations with funeral directors there. So the question is, how can we help the light bulb go off for them so that they see it as good for their business? So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'd like to turn it over for a moment now to, she doesn't like to be called a celebrity. I know, Lee, but you're as close as we got on this call. So I'm going to turn it over to you, our niche celebrity, Lee Webster. Lee, please just kind of like share a little bit about your background, talk about what you've done, and then we'll get into more specific conversations about the courses.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. I think the what I'd like to do is talk about the real celebrity that is probably not in the room, and that's Joe Seehey, who started the Green Burial Council. I came on the scene. I'd met him for at other conferences because I've been in this work now for about 17 years or so in home funerals and end-of-life doula work and conservation burial and hospice and all those types of things. Don't need to go into all of that, but I'd met Joe, and we'd hit it off. We'd stayed in contact. And in 2014, he formed, 10 years after the GBC certification group was formed, he formed the education wing. And he pulled a whole bunch of us together. And of all places, we ended up in Ann Arbor, Michigan on retreat. And so you can see where a lot of this synchronicity is coming from here. But we all came together to design what the education group was going to look like. A lot of people thought that the GBC was already education, but it wasn't. We wanted to make that a reality. And so once we had pulled that together, it was just off to the races, coming up with programs like this, these types of models, so that we could offer our providers information and provide information for the providers that they could then disseminate to the people that they serve, so that we had various audiences that we were looking for to educate around all of this business. But I want to say one of the most important things that Joe Seehey ever said to me was this. He said, nobody goes to a restaurant and orders something that's not on the menu. And that made all the sense in the world to me. And it has been the guiding principle of all the work that I've done for the GBC, both in that first period when I was on the board, developing all of the educational materials and helping move the council forward. And when I came back again a couple of years later as president, making sure that everything was still running well. And we got a few more things off the ground, like in-person conferences and later online conferences. But it took a whole group of people working together. I couldn't have written any of the things I wrote. I couldn't have been out there speaking to groups about anything if I hadn't been informed by the most important people in the work. And I went everywhere I could. I had cemeterians and funeral directors and clergy and instructors. I mean, I just had everybody I could find who had information that would be valuable to anyone looking for educational resources. So we built all that, put that together. And my sense is that a lot of it still holds true, works pretty well. And what we're doing now, of course, is working still on improving these courses. The green burial, the green funerals course that Sam is now teaching, sprung out of that effort, and the masterclass for cemeterians came a little bit later, but with the same level of information. So I hope that gets us up to date on how we got here and what felt important to me then and feels really critically important to me still.
Great. So Lee, that was a nice transition over to Sam's work. Sam, how about you jump in and give a little introduction about you, your work, and how you got here?
Yeah, so my name is Samuel Perry. Most people just call me Sam. I am a licensed funeral director in Indiana and Illinois. I recently became the C3, so the Green Burial Council's C3 president, the education wing of the Green Burial Council. As Lee indicated, I teach the Green Funeral Service course at ReDesigning the End, which is open to the public. Funeral directors can get continuing education there. And then I also am a full-time lecturer at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, teaching mortuary students, so aspiring funeral directors. And I just wanted to kind of say that the Green Burial Council really made me who I was, and I'm so thankful to be here, sort of in the council today. When I was in mortuary school, this information didn't exist. And I came to this group back then, over a decade ago, and was welcomed and taught by a lot of great people like Webster, who continued to bring me into the field. And it's exciting to see now that in mortuary school, this is starting to become part of the curriculum. And I'm hoping to make it a bigger part of the curriculum, which we'll talk about more here today.
Sam, when you came to the community and you felt the light bulb go off for you, you felt like you were accepted and educated. What was it that you needed, and how can you help everybody here carry that forward and help as many light bulbs go off for people in that position, moving forward?
Sure. So I've always had a real love for the outdoors, and I came to funeral service through the love of outdoors, ironically. So, which is a little strange. I just always worked like doing lawn service, and that's how I got into the local funeral home. But when I went to mortuary school, I didn't feel like my people existed there. It was sort of counter to everything I believed in, and I was really looking for my community. And so I think what I found at the Green Burial Council was community, and like-minded people who wanted something more sustainable in the end of life. And I think my light bulb and what keeps me going is all of the people I've met. So we sort of joked about not having any celebrities in this group, because we all need to be here. We all need to come together with our specialties to make this happen across our individual communities, across our industries. And I think what the light bulb that stayed on for me is just that I think I found my little place, and I hope you all find your little place in this as well, so that we can come together and continue to make this better, because it's such a new idea in our modern world, even though it's an idea that's existed for all time.
So leading up to this event, I got a note from somebody saying, I'm giving a presentation to a Funeral Directors Association meeting coming up. And so what's your coaching going into that meeting? What do you think? And this goes back to the Funeral Directors Association conference that we were just at. You just had all these conversations with people who are interested. What is Green Burial? What does Green Burial Council do? So what's your advice about the right way to enter into those conversations and get the best outcome?
So I think what I was surprised at the National Funeral Directors Association is a lot of those people were coming up to us pretty informed already and just were hungry to learn more. So that was exciting. And I think as far as I tell my students, and what I think is a really great idea is to come up with your own elevator speech. So a concise message about what is green burial, because so many people are interested in having sustainable funeral services, but don't know what it is. And so being really concise about that, what that is. For me, I always mention something about body care, something about the burial container, and something about the cemetery. So 3 main points that I always try to cover. So for body care, the body is not embalmed. We're trying to care for the body in the most natural way possible. As far as the burial container goes, that it's biodegradable, it's sourced responsibly, and then the cemetery that allows green burial, it has a standard for green burial. And to go kind of beyond that, I think some feedback I've gotten from folks in general when I'm educating my community is some people assume that means that dignity doesn't come with that, that you're not caring for the body at all. And I like to emphasize that we're still caring for the body. And maybe that's a funeral director thing. I talk to a lot of funeral directors. And so they think about green burial as direct burial. And I think that's a false way to think about this, because there's still a lot of care and respect that goes into the body, even though embalming isn't done. There's so much outside of embalming that is still done to make the body presentable, dignified, and ready for a ritual. So the other thing I would tell someone who's talking to funeral directors is that even though they may not be super comfortable or know a lot about it, they do want to serve you, and they do want to give you what you ask for in the best way that they can, the best in a most legal way possible. So if you're coming at this informed and you feel like you're getting maybe a little bit of pushback, find a way to partner with them instead of argue with them. It would be my challenge to you. So not being polar about it, but meeting in the middle somewhere. Because like you said, we're kind of in this transitional moment where there isn't a lot of access. And so I think people are quick to say, well, we don't have a green cemetery here. We don't offer that option here, so we can't do that for you. But there are ways that we can make things more green in this transitional time, ways to advocate for ourselves to get this option.
Great, super helpful. Lee, anything to add there? I know we're going to focus in on the green cemeteries piece with you, but I'm sure you've got something to kind of maybe add to that piece when you're having those meetings with funeral directors or people that are in related adjacent spaces.
Yeah, I think that there are a couple of things going on here that you touched on that make sense to me in terms of what our audience needs to hear about. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of different audiences for this information. And what Sam is really talking about here is it is a peer-to-peer, funeral director to funeral director. Well, I'm not a funeral director. So a lot of my work has to do with what I call citizen advocacy and education. So a lot of what I think we're trying to do is meet all of this on multiple fronts, and we all have a pretty similar message. But here's what I hear from cemeterians and clergy and educators and everybody that I run into. They'll all tell me, okay, we're convinced, we think it's fabulous, but how do you do it? That's the big question. And that's why the work that I do is to burrow down in there as far as I can and provide all of this. I mean, a lot of people have the sense, I think, that that funerals and everything is shrouded in mystery. And the only way that this movement is going to move forward is if we just pull the veil aside and go, okay, it's really simple. Here's how we dig the hole, right? Basic technical information. Certainly all of the persuasive arguments are really important. And a lot of us do that when we're out speaking to senior groups, or, I talk to a lot of mortuary schools. I'm very much in favor of change from within. But to get that message out there means that we have to give the soft pitch, but we have to be ready to follow up with the real mechanical, how-tos when we're done. And I think that's one of the things that I brought to the GBC, and I love to see increasing information out there so that all of us, no matter what, whether we're a professional in this as a cemeterian, funeral director, or a end-of-life doulas and after-death care educators, whoever you are, you can put your fingertips on the type of information that people you speak to are hungry for. And that's the picture for me.
Yeah, Lee, let's talk more about that for a second. When we first connected to talk about the Green Cemeteries course, we were kind of liking this concept of, we don't want to give people appetizers. We want the whole meal, everything you need. So talk to me about why technical, detailed information is needed. And then if you have any real world stories about how that made a difference, it'd be great to hear those too.
Oh, I've got a great real world story. Let me start with that. Because essentially that's what the issue is that we don't know what we don't know. And people who've gone to school for a particular track are going to know that track, but they may not know this one over here. I don't fault anyone who's in any of this work for not knowing anything about green burial or what they need to know to actually make this happen. That's why we're here. That's what nonprofits are for, right? As opposed to for-profits. But here's one of the things that happened in my work. I'm from Vermont originally, so I got called by the Vermont legislature a few years ago when they were trying to change some legislation around green burial. And I came up against, while I was, laying out the good stuff for them, came up against the brother of a guy I'd gone to high school with who runs my local cemetery in the town I was born in. And he was adamantly opposed to all of this. He had things to say about vultures coming and hanging out over graves and smells and, the horror shows of it all that everyone imagines. This is a guy who had been running a cemetery for decades already. And by the end of this process of going through this legislative change, he is now one of the greatest advocates for green burial in the country. And because he's a convert, like, smokers who don't smoke anymore, he's out there talking and he's speaking the language that his fellow skeptics need to hear. That's a success story of being persuasive, but also, he's the guy who said to me, it's fabulous, but how do I do it? And that, that just kicked in. And I just said, here we go. Let's sit down. Let's work this out. And it also gave me the opportunity to develop a whole other set of educational materials specifically for cemetery trustees, which we have here in New England. We don't have all over the country, but these are people who run our cemeteries and who have no idea where to begin when you say get rid of the vault. So that's why it's so important to meet everybody on all these different levels, but be really prepared for the technical. And I would mention one other thing. With the Green Burial Masterclass, we had in the first cohort that came through, we had a lot of people come in. It was a really, really dynamic course. And we had people from all over the world. I think we had South Korea and you name it. And we had a gentleman, Adam, from the Czech Republic. And just 2 weeks ago, he opened the first natural burial cemetery in the Czech Republic. This is what educating people about details does. It opens the door for them so that they then have the expertise and the argument so they can go in and make change in their local place, wherever they are.
What's an example of something that Adam might have learned that he couldn't have gotten that was essential? Even a mundane thing, you know what I mean? Just like a small thing that would have hung him up.
Yeah, sometimes, well, because what we deal with both the physical things about, how to dig the graves and how to manage a cemetery. We talk about all kinds of things having to do with how to manage the business end of it, how to manage the money end of it, and all that kind of thing. And I think the thing he was the most interested in, because it was the cultural aspect of it, and being able to see a cross-cultural picture, being able to take that back and fit that into his cemetery, which is a religious, I believe it was a religious cemetery to start with, he had the language and the understanding about how to approach people who might not know how to do it. I mean, that's a skill set right there. He also learned, what kind of shovels to buy. Right.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sam, coming over to you with a similar line of questioning. What are the ways in which the courses that you teach get into the specifics that someone coming out of mortuary school might not even know? In what way is being specific and detailed been helpful in the training that you do?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is that in mortuary school, embalming is the keystone of everything we learn, right? And so you take that away and you sort of take the feet out from under a funeral director. So I've been investigating and building out information on how to care for the body without embalming. And especially when those cases get complicated, and especially when families want to be involved in that process, because those are all fairly foreign for funeral directors of the past. So that has been a really interesting place for me to continue to learn and get more specific and drill down into, like, how do we handle someone who's at the coroner's office, someone who's had an autopsy, who body care, postmortem body care is central to what a funeral director does, central to what an embalmer does, what a home funeral guide might do. And so all these folks have been adding really great components to the course that together I've learned a lot from them.
All right. In just a moment, I'm going to ask everybody to start typing questions into the chat. If you don't want to see the chat, you can turn it off for yourself. But I'd like to see people's questions start to roll in. I think that that's a really valuable piece of a live event like this. While we wait for questions to kind of roll in, I just want to ask, Lee, how do you know within a community when somebody is worth engaging with, and needs to hear this information and is kind of like ripe for being educated and is receptive?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because, as I say, I'm out speaking all the time, but I'm invited where I'm going, so I have a captive audience most of the time. They're either taking my courses if they've managed to leave the house and come see me. But I also get a lot of calls from the media, and I find that a lot of media reporters are asking the question just because they've been assigned this. And I find that's some of the most interesting conversations that I can have, because I have to assess while I'm speaking to them how far I can go with some of the concepts around natural burial, and how much detail they're really interested in. I wait to hear what people have to say. I'm watching, if I'm there in person or I'm on Zoom, I'm really watching for all the cues that we're all looking for when we're speaking to listeners. And I ask questions back. I will just keep asking. And then I think that's the real key. If you're in a conversation with someone who's either approached you or you've decided to approach, always be asking them questions. Stay curious, find out what they need to know, suss it out. Don't just barrage people with all your fabulous facts, which I love to do, but I know better than. Is that helpful? Is that useful at all?
Yeah, no, that is helpful. So I've got a first question from the audience, and I would encourage more questions to come in. First question is, do I have to be a funeral director to start a green cemetery?
Can I answer that one?
Dive in.
No, you absolutely don't. And in fact, there are 5 states in the US where you cannot own or operate a cemetery if you are a funeral director. And there might be more. There are some that are kind of squishy on it. So this is not it. And you will find that I can tell you from my work with the Conservation Burial Alliance that almost everybody in there started out as not involved in death work in any way whatsoever. They just thought this was the best idea possible. Billy Campbell and Kimberly, who started Ramsey Creek 25 years ago this month. So shout out for that. Billy's a country doctor, and he had nothing to do with this. It just became something that was imperative for him. We have lots of people who are involved in this. And by the way, I wanted to mention another real fact about this that might be encouraging to you. 50% of the conservation burial operators that are in the Conservation Burial Alliance are women, 50% men. This is an equal opportunity for a lot of people. I think this all appeals to people on social and environmental justice issues that are really important to many of us, and certainly to me. You know, if you have the bug to see this happen, there is nothing holding you back. There's not one state that is going to say to you, oh, you don't have whatever background. You can get the background. You can learn what you need, particularly if you're taking some of these classes we're talking about. And you'll be prepared and you'll know how to deal with those officials as well.
Sam, anything to add on your end? What are there things that you do? There are things that you do have to be a funeral director to do.
Sure. So not in all states do you have to be a funeral director to care for the body, but usually to be a funeral director, care of the body is central to our work. So there are a handful of states where the body, according to the Funeral Consumers Alliance, becomes a hostage to the funeral industry. I actually live in 2 of those states, Indiana and Illinois. And it's part of why I'm here. I am a funeral director, so it seems kind of counterintuitive, but I felt like I had to remain a funeral director in order for my family and my community to get these things in these states. So yeah, a funeral director or embalmer is typically the work surrounds the care of the body.
Next question. How difficult or easy is it for traditional cemeteries to add natural burial?
Well, I can answer that a little bit. I've found in the work that I've done, particularly with the people who run cemeteries, because I help educate them. I also come in and consult with them to go over their bylaws, because that's the key. It's always the bylaws or the ordinances around the cemetery. All of this is local. States don't have much to say about how cemeteries are operated. It's local. So it's local people in your own community. That's who you need to convince, and that's who you need to work with hand in hand to change the language. And the language change comes along with, again, sitting down with the sexton, the guy who actually has to perform this, and work out ways that are going to work for their specific cemetery. So, you know, if your local municipal cemetery is built, you know, 4 vaults and there just isn't any space there for green, then the conversation is, how can we add space? If there is space there and it all makes sense, then that's the conversation you have. So it all depends. It's very local. Think of it very locally. And it then ends up being about personalities. So let's hope you're a people person.
And I'd like to call people's attention to the work that has been done in Durham, North Carolina. We've had participants in the Green Burial Masterclass from Durham, North Carolina, working through the city to do a really cool project that I would encourage people to Google. It's a really neat example of a traditional cemetery becoming partially a natural burial cemetery. All right, next question. What are the common misconceptions people have about green burial?
You want that one, Sam? You want to talk about stinky bodies and animal disturbances?
Yeah, I think the animals digging up the graves is probably the one I get the most, which doesn't happen. Most states have laws regarding the depth of the grave, so at least 2 feet above the container that's used. That's a big one. I mentioned this already, but for me, the one I keep hitting is that, you know, just because it's green doesn't mean that there's not a lot of care or service or ritual that goes into it. Uh, every funeral director I talk to is always like, "Oh, that sounds like direct burial." No, because there's so much more that can happen, as far as allowing the family to participate in the care of the body, dressing the body, bringing ritual around that process of dressing and caring for the body. Um, those are the two that come to my mind the most. I think the other one that I get asked a lot is, you know, this is just a trend. This is just for the hippies. But no, this like meets so many communities. It meets so many communities where they are. So many religious backgrounds. In fact, my dad didn't really, this is kind of one of my favorite examples. He's a countryman from the rural community. He was like, I don't want that. I don't want my body on display. I just want something simple. Throw me in the backyard. Well, Dad, that's how we do that. But with respect and dignity. It's the simple way of funeral services. It can be. It doesn't have to be simple either. There's really a spectrum that you can have in these services, depending on how involved, how much money that you want to put towards this experience.
Yeah, I want to go back for just a second about the question about, you know, what people ask about this, and remind people that on the GBC website under education, you're going to find some documents that were built. These are community tools for you to use and bring with you when you're out speaking, or send to people when they ask questions. And one of them, one of my favorites that I ever wrote, is real answers to questions real people ask about green burial. And it starts with that, you know, animals digging people up. And I tried to write this in a way that people would really understand and they would kind of get a kick out of. And it's really helpful. You know, they want to bring it home. They want to sit down and read it. And we address like 10 major issues that come up continuously. So look for those community education documents. You know, there's also one about, you know, 10 things to talk to your cemetery operator about, right? How to convince them or something. Lots of influencing language and that type of thing. So yeah, and believe me, if there's a question that's been asked, we've found the answer to it. We worked as hard as we can. You'll find several frequently asked questions sections on the GBC website. So take a look for those too.
And Ryan just dropped that in the chat. So if you want a direct link to that,
Right.
You can find that in the chat.
All right. After a slow start, the questions are rolling in. So I'm going to keep you moving. Do you envision a future in which mortuary schools have a non-embalming or green funeral track for those interested in becoming funeral directors without embalming?
Absolutely, yes. In fact, I'm really proud to be part of a school that has the first in-person course on green funeral services. So it actually exists here. I'm really, really proud of that. And a lot of thanks goes to Lee for helping create a lot of that, and encourage me to keep going in that field. But also did my master's on how can we make this fit the American Board of Funeral Service Education's needs, which is the accrediting body for mortuary schools, so ABFSC. And I have that put together now that I've had a little experience teaching it in person. At NFDA, I had a couple of them come up to me, and so I'm really excited to start stirring that pot and putting that magic into the world. So.
Yeah, I have to say, when I'm talking to mortuary schools, I just come in as a guest lecturer, but I find that the instructors who think it's a good idea to have this introduced get more excited about this, and they get more feedback from students about this than anything else in the whole course. I've heard that over and over again. And another interesting thing is happening here. I just want to mention. Here, I teach a guest lecture at the Fine Mortuary School in Boston a lot. And I just got some new figures from them that 82% of their class this last year is women. So we're seeing not just, I keep coming back to women in the work, particularly in funeral directing work. We have an opportunity here to educate in a very different way. We've got a very receptive group that's coming through mortuary school right now. They're replacing a lot of retirees. And I have to tell you, it's so encouraging. They're so curious, they're interested, they absorb everything like a sponge. And I think in the next 10 years or so, we're going to see a complete flip from inside the industry. And yes, and teaching it to as certification courses is really important. We also, here at the GBC, we do our own certification piece because we have a certifying body. And that's what the GBC has partnered with Brian at ReDesigning the End to do. So there's lots of opportunities now. We're going to see how that branches out and envelops, I hope, the industry.
All right. We've got a potential for a green section in our city cemetery. Where do I start?
Yeah, well, this might be counterintuitive to anything else we already said, but you build your posse, because one lone ranger is not going to get the job done. Find your people, just as Sam was talking about. Find your people, build a coalition, get out there, talk at every library and every church and everything you possibly can, and start, taking names and get those people with you to then approach the authorities in that cemetery. That's how you get started, because it's going to take a lot of people to come in and negotiate in calmly, people who are well educated, and can deal again with resistance, right? Because one of the first things you're going to run into is some form of resistance. I'm not saying hostility, but it's going to be some form of resistance, because this is a new concept for a lot of people who've been doing it for 40 years. You have to be patient. This is going to take a lot of time. But that's my take on it. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, just being ready for resistance, not as like a negative necessarily, but an opportunity to educate and partner, not creating enemies, creating partners and community around the idea. There are solutions to the problems, definitely.
Right.
All right, we got about 8 minutes left and about 5 or 6 questions. So keep that in mind as we roll.
Is this the lightning round?
We're getting close to lightning round, and this is not a lightning question. I'd like to hear a discussion of the situation in Colorado regarding the Green Funeral Home that mistreated bodies, and also of the situation in Minnesota with the legislative moratorium on new green burial cemeteries.
Yeah, I just very quickly, I'm just going to say the Colorado issue is very disturbing for the Green Burial Council. It's disturbing for any of Colorado's green cemeteries, all of that, because the media, again, is taking this and twisting. They're using the green burial piece to sell the headline, when this person, to my knowledge, has had absolutely nothing to do with the GBC and has not done any green burial. I don't know any. I've been talking to cemeterians. Nobody's even worked with this guy. So this is really tough. It's hard for the green burial piece. I'll let Sam talk about the funeral directing piece. But you asked about the other group. The
Minnesota.
Yeah, the moratorium. Yeah. What can I tell you? Resistance, ignorance. That all we can do is what is happening right now. There's a coalition building. There are people who are prepping, doing the best they can to address those who don't understand.
Yeah, with Colorado, it's really a shame that people like him get in our industry. Unfortunately, it's the bad guys, which exist in every industry, that get in the news the most. It's a huge disappointment. And it's just shameful the way that he handled, something that is so important to his community. He's broken trust that will take a lot of time to rebuild again. So I just feel so sorry for those families, and that is not a majority of the funeral industry, and it doesn't represent green burial. So.
Okay, next question. If I'm starting a natural burial park in my community, how do I raise awareness about my presence?
Yeah, all the things we've been talking about with the citizen advocacy piece. Get yourself out there on the speaking circuit and just start educating people. That's the key.
I'm a funeral director in Southern Indiana. I'm implementing green options at my funeral home. There are no green cemeteries in my area. Where do I begin with the process of starting a green burial ground? I own 36 acres currently, so it's doable on my land, possibly.
That's great.
Take the course, right, Sam?
Yeah, exactly. I'm a fellow Hoosier, so welcome. You're kind of talking about two different sides, and honestly, you could benefit from both of our courses. I teach, funeral directing more side funeral service, and Lee's class is more cemetery oriented. And you have a huge leap and benefit that you have land available to you already, because that's a big barrier for most people. So I think you have a one up on most people that you have the land available already.
What marketing approaches have you seen bring the most success to green burial grounds over time? How do you recommend green cemeteries provide public education in meaningful ways?
Yeah, the first part of the question is interesting. It's word of mouth. I mean, that's really how it happens. I do want to mention that, like the map that you showed earlier, Brian, were the certified cemeteries. Those are cemeteries certified by the GBC. However, there is a master list on the New Hampshire Funeral website that I keep for all of these organizations. We have, as of this afternoon, I know of 418 green cemeteries in the US and Canada. So, what's happening to get the word out with them? It goes from cemetery to cemetery. If you get a group in a state, and you're going to find it's like dominoes in the municipal and the church cemeteries. One group goes, and then somebody gets curious, they hear about it, and they keep on going. So it really is, that's the way it travels. That's the marketing. Again, public education from green cemeteries. Most of the people that I know who run cemeteries are out there speaking to the local Rotary over runny eggs in the morning and things like that. That's what we do. It's part of our job as cemeterians, is to get out and educate people.
3 more minutes of questions. We have been working for a couple of years to bring a conservation burial grounds to Michigan. One of the barriers we have run into is neighbors having concerns or fears about water contamination. What's your response to reassure the public when people ask about water?
Yeah, there's a longer explanation about this that Dr. Billy Campbell and I have written about. You can find that information also, or contact me. It's the same argument. Everybody's got it. And there's a really long explanation around it. We need to simplify the message, because we can't just say to people, nope, don't worry about it. Just check out some of these materials that are on the GBC website. The science behind green burial is going to explain exactly how much, what the contamination factors might be, what the potentials are, and what that looks like if you're looking for arguments to bring to the conversation.
I think one of the things the message I loved hearing was this: the soil is a solar system, and it will filter and take care of most of the problems if you have that barrier. But
Ryan, I'm going to ask really quick. I can see that we're not going to be able to finish all the questions by 7 o'clock my time. How do you want to handle that? Should we give people a place to send their questions? I'm happy to receive those questions and kind of like work on them over time. Or do we want to extend for a couple minutes? I don't know how we want to play it. I'll ask one question in the meantime.
Absolutely. So everyone is welcome to continue putting your questions in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. And the speakers are welcome to stay on as long as you'd like, but we do want to be respectful of your time. So if you want to wrap up at the hour, that's perfectly fine. And if you have a little bit of flexibility, that's welcome too.
Great. Well, let's do questions up until the top of the hour. Then I'll finish with three minutes after that, and then we'll let everybody go a little bit late, but not too late. All right.
And I'm happy to answer any of these questions if you want to contact me directly.
Love it. Yeah. All right. Yeah. We're a nonprofit launching a green burial site in Maryland. Seems like people use bylaws and rules and regulations interchangeably. Should they be the same or two distinct documents? We have super general bylaws and are working on very specific rules and regulations for licensing purposes. Does this sound like the right approach, or are we making things more complicated than they need to be?
My experience is that it depends on the cemetery trustees, the cemetery operators. Some places are larger, they require more. Some states might require a little bit more information. But for the most part, it's really up to the people who are running the cemetery, how they want to organize their documents.
I'm kind of hearing a separate question that we talk a lot about in class, which is really knowing the difference between what is law and what is rule. So
What's
like,
policy?
yeah, what's policy? So most people assume that embalming is required by law, but that's not true. Most times it's required as a rule. So just when you're talking to your communities, being really clear about that. Also, every state has their own laws dictating these things, so being really clear about your state's laws.
I'm in Canada in an area where there are no winter burials. This is driving people toward cremation because burial is only available for half the year. What's the experience in other cold areas about changing this reality?
Well, there are 3 states in the Midwest that require that cemeteries stay open in the winter, and they have pretty heavy snow loads, and they've been able to manage it all along. So the idea that it's not possible is off the table. It's very possible. Here's what's happening around me. I'm in New England. We have the same weather situation, but we're finding that by a show of hands at cemetery associations, I'm learning that cemeterians who used to not allow winter burial are now opening in the winter because of climate change. Those things are changing. So keep on talking to them. There are ways to do it. There are tools to use. Keep talking to those cemetery operators and help them learn new techniques.
What are the minimum maintenance equipment needs for a green cemetery?
Again, there's no one answer to that. We can offer a whole lot of information about what to look for and what's going to work for you, depending on your topography and your staff. There's no one way to answer that. Sorry.
Are you finding that existing environmental conservation and land management organizations are interested in developing green burial opportunities? And then the same question regarding Bureau of Land Management specifically.
Yeah, land trusts are a hard nut to crack, I can tell you, because I've been working with them for 30 years, writing easements from the very beginning. There is now, finally, in the last couple of years, more conversation within land trusts about breaking the trust in order to allow burial. So I'm seeing very incremental, and this is a very, very conservative group, conservation trustees and operators are really, really careful because they're looking way forward to the future. So the idea of changing something that someone thought was in stone is anathema to this group. But I am seeing a tiny bit of movement. We're going to be looking at that. Bureau of Land Management, I think that's a whole other bag. There's way more involved here having to do with Indigenous peoples and burial space and so on. I think that would be an entire conversation with the right people at another time.
Okay, this is the last question. I'm going to kind of combine 2 questions here, 2 for 1. The question is, do you have information about how families and friends deal with hospitals and their standard way of handling the deceased? And the related question was about, how do you think about encouraging the system to change and educating the providers versus educating the families and the end users and empowering, people to do their own?
Yeah, I want Sam to answer this, but I also want to tell people that there is a book called the After Death Care Educator Handbook, and in it is an entire book, combined a whole bunch of books, put it into one, and it specifically deals with how to negotiate body release policies in institutions like hospitals, hospices, and nursing homes. So that's a pretty critical place to start when we're thinking about working with them and changing their policy that may not be compliant with the law of the state. But Sam, I know you've got something to say about that.
Yeah, it can be a clunky process to begin with because it's sort of a well-oiled machine, right? That they're used to handing off the deceased to a funeral director. So initially, it might be finding a funeral director who is supportive of the idea to help navigate that realm, who's familiar with that particular hospital and the particular heavy hitters in that hospital who can adjust policy to be in your favor. And then, oh, Brian, I think you went quiet. There was a separate question.
All right, sorry about that.
That's
You know
okay.
what? We just hit the top of the hour. If you don't mind, Lee, would you mind popping your contact information, and Sam, also you two, into the chat? Just because I think a couple people were interested in following up with you directly. I wanted to call attention to the courses that you teach that we've referenced a lot here. If you go to the Green Burial Council website, under the education, you can follow the Learn, and then there's a Green Funerals course, which is Sam's course, and the Green Cemetery course, which is Lee's course. They're both really, really excellent educational experiences. I get a chance to kind of like see it firsthand. So highly recommend checking those out, along with all the other amazing information available on the GBC website. So thanks again to the GBC for hosting us. And Lee and Sam, thanks for bringing the thunder.
Yeah. Thanks for hosting, Brian. Yeah, we appreciate you so much. And thank you all for coming.
I think before we sign off, we have one final slide.
Yep.
Yes. So just wanted to quickly say thank you, obviously, for joining us. We are hoping to start doing peer-to-peer forums more regularly on a quarterly basis, and then we are also going to be offering a public-facing webinar series going forward on a quarterly basis as well. I know there was some discussion in the chat. The peer-to-peers are generally geared towards death care professionals, and then we are going to be starting a more public-facing webinar series. We also have to put our plug in at the end. We're a nonprofit, and increasing awareness and keeping these events free and open to the public is something we want to do. So if you'd like to submit a donation, you can donate on our website, greenburialcouncil.org. Additionally, I know Sam and Lee put their chats, their emails in the chat, but if you do have any questions and you weren't able to write it down or you can't catch up, on our website there's a link to our just a info box email. It's info@greenburialcouncil.org. You can send anything there. It's monitored and we can kind of like filter it out to either Sam or Brian, Lee, or if there's someone else in the organization that's better suited to answer that question, we'd be happy to do that as well. And Ryan just popped that in the chat too. So I know we're a tiny bit over, but we did pretty darn good. Is there anything else, Sam, Lee, Brian, you want to add before we sign off?
Nope, just grateful that you're continuing the work.
Yeah, thank you everybody for all your help and support.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for attending. This was a great turnout for one of our events, so thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.
Have a great night.
Okay, bye everyone.